Hi there, welcome to the Painterly podcast, the podcast by artists for artists. I'm your host, Alex Foley, and today I'm joined by Camilo Carreno, who is an artist based in Chicago. He's a contemporary figurative artist born in Bogota, Colombia in 1981, who works mainly in graphite, watercolor, and in digital painting. He has a master's degree in visual arts with an emphasis in plastic studies from the Policia Universidad uh, Javierana, Bogota. Did I get that right at all? Is that even close?
You're close.
Uh, I spent all day just like being like Carreno. I can't roll my R's, so I was doing
Yeah.
it all day, and my friend was like, "You sound like you're trying to do like a Wookiee impression, so please stop and don't do that." And I was like, "Okay,
I
fair."
definitely don't have a easy to pronounce last name, and I definitely don't have an easy to pronounce college. So
Well, I just don't speak any Spanish, so at a slight disadvantage. How are you?
good. How are you doing?
Yeah,
How's
I'm okay, thanks. Yeah. You just got off an airplane, which goes well with today's theme of movement. And
yes.
we're recording quite late because you had a nightmare with um immigration, customs, whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a trip when you get here. It could be like easygoing or it could be like a total nightmare. And today it was total nightmare for me. So
Where were you?
I
You went to
don't.
Panama, right? And then
Yes. So usually when there's no direct flights from Bogota to Chicago, so I usually always have to connect. And the Panama connection, um it's the best one to do because usually when you connect to the U.S. you have to like do customs on your first airport, and you have to pull out your bags, and then you have to like recheck them and go through customs and go through TSA check and all of that stuff. So Panama is just like easy going, like basically pretty much like a local, like a domestic flight. So
okay,
just like come in and go to your gate, and that's it.
nice. Oh,
So, yeah,
well,
still a little
um,
bit of a long flight, so bear with me
fair.
because I'm gonna be a little bit scatterbrained.
That's okay. That's okay. I totally get it. So why don't you tell listeners about your work and what it is that you normally do?
Absolutely. So well, I've been drawing mostly. I would say like my main practice is drawing, and I've been drawing for the best part of the last 20 to 30 years, since I was in college. Well, even before I was in college. And the funny thing is, like, the way into I got in college was kind of weird because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I knew how to draw, and I was good at it, kind of like. But what I did at that time was I just like did like copies of like manga drawings. So
Okay.
that's how I decided for the career, because I was like pretty loud. I wanted to be a pilot, actually, but my parents couldn't afford to pay me for like flying lessons. So I was like, yeah, tough luck. And that was like the only, like, I only thought about it. And then I was like, out of the floor then. And I was just like, well, I'm good at drawing, so might as well. I did actually started political science, and I did like a year of political science. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Colombian political landscape, but it's super awful. It's a very, very tough, world. It's There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of bad stuff, and kind of like you get the gist of it pretty quick, even when you go to like a political science career. You kind of like start seeing like a lot of stuff, and I was like, this is not for me. I don't want to do this. And so then is when I decided, because you get to that point, especially in a country like Colombia. You're kind of like not forced, but you kind of like force yourself to think, I have to pick something that might be, that might give me money to sustain myself. In art, especially in Colombia, was like kind of like what am I gonna do when I graduate? And so I kind of like panicked, and that's why I picked political science first, and then I said like I cannot do it. Like I have a problem is that when I try to do something that I don't want to do, it's really hard for me, and it's I have to force myself, and it just like becomes really really, really stressful and hard for me to do stuff when I don't want to do it, especially when I was younger. So I was like, I'm not gonna get through this. There's no way I'm getting through this. So I decided for arts just because like kind of like I know how to do it. Like I and I but that being said, I had no idea about arts. Like I've seen like a couple of paintings. Like I could name Picasso or like Dali or something like that. But I was like, if you ask me for painters or artists, like I couldn't name more than two. I would struggle to like find the third one.
That's very
So
fair.
so in order to enter, they asked me to get this portfolio, right? Like you have to prepare a portfolio with your draw with what you do, your art, whatever. And my portfolio were four or five drawings of like Dragon Ball Z, like something like that. It was ridiculous.
But clearly,
And
very, very good Dragon Ball Z drawings because you got it.
well, I don't know. I sometimes think it was a clerical error or something like that. But well, whatever. Because I got there to the to show my portfolio and do like the interview and stuff. And I saw all of those guys coming in, like all these people coming in with like sculptures and like paintings and oil paintings. And I was like, I'm an idiot. Like there's no way I'm gonna get through. Like there's no way. And I did it. I was able to get through. So that was
Well,
cool, and I got really cool teachers there, and that's how it started. Like they kind of like taught me how to draw, like how to observe, because at the end of the day, like now that I see it, like a little bit in retrospect, I think learning how to draw is really learning how to like look
mm.
and translate what you see with your hands, and that's the way I was taught. Just observe and try to draw what you're seeing, which was a little bit also like a drawback because I feel like at that time I was like a lot more imaginative about what I drew. Like I was really it was really easy for me to like think about stuff and like draw it, and college kind of like killed it for me. Like I became like very structured into like, oh, I have to draw what I see. I have to draw what I see, and then it became now it's really difficult for me to like just like draw things out of thin air. Like I cannot. I have
I
to I have to see what I draw, or else I cannot do it.
I was listening to a conversation with Tracy Emin and gosh, who was it? It was Lucian Freud's assistant, David Dawson, earlier today, and they were contrasting how Lucian Freud was very focused on painting what he saw, and I was like,
Right.
as opposed to what? And then Tracy Emin talked about painting from memory, and my initial instinct was, well, no, painting is you paint what you see. And then I sort of
Yeah.
realized how similarly I'm very restricted in terms of I find it very difficult to paint anything that's not there and to imagine something into the painting. So yeah,
I
I'm very similar.
yeah, I think it
Um,
depends on like what kind of structure you're like taught in. Like I feel like my teachers were a little bit more classical, and so like they went to like atelier kind of instruction. I didn't have like atelier, like very close to atelier, but not atelier like mine. My instruction wasn't like that strict.
mm.
And also like I had like all sorts of teachers. Like I had very strict teachers. I had like more, how do you put it? Like more flexible kind of teachers that were like so for some teachers, like likeness was important. For some others, it was not as important, so on and so forth. So like kind of like it was a little bit like this and that, but it was like it wasn't like there that very structured atelier kind of learning.
And what year did you move to Lori Lightfoot's Chicago?
So that was more chance, I would say, because we actually moved here because of my wife's work.
Okay.
So my wife and I both work on the software industry. I'm not a full-time artist. I actually just, it's kind of like pastime to me. My wife and I both work as quality assurance analysts, and we both worked at the same company. And she worked for a project that eventually asked her if she wanted to like transfer here. And yeah, we talked about it. We moved. We were already married. Like we were like what, like 5 years into our marriage, something like that, when we decided to move here. So yeah, it's it's chance that I eventually moved here.
And what year was
Nothing to
that?
do with my art really. That was on 2015 that we moved.
2015.
Yeah,
So
May of
just before
2015.
everything hit the fan.
Yes, yes, it was a very interesting thing because I don't know if it's on your mind, right? Like, but 2015 was, it was the Obama years. Everything seemed more progressive. I'm very progressive, by the way. So, well, I kind of like have progressed. Like if I had to like label myself, like political spectrum, I would like definitely like label myself as progressive. So everything seemed like going into that direction, right? Like, yeah, Obama is here. Like, yeah, it's fun. I know some people that are like really, really left would like have issues with that statement of Obama being progressive. Because some people don't think he's that progressive at all. But in the context of the states, it's like
Yeah, for the
the
time
left of the left.
it was
Yeah, it
really
was. Yeah,
shocking that he would
it was a
be.
real revolution. It triggered,
Yeah,
I guess, it triggered a lot of stuff. But anyways, like in our minds, we were like, yeah, okay, it's great. Like, the U.S. is changing. It's becoming more progressive. It's probably gonna trigger. You kind of like think things are going to be exactly the opposite of how they turned out to be eventually. So and it was actually kind of difficult. Like it was a very difficult adjustment for both me and my wife because I thought I was going to have an easier time adapting to the U.S. culture. And because since I was a kid, since I was in high school, I went to a high school that was very influenced by the U.S. because they actually, the main high school, like the high school I went to, it's kind of like a satellite high school of high school called St. Viator School that's here in Chicago, in Arlington Heights.
okay.
So I went to that high school for like 11 years. Because in Colombia you go to the same, like you don't switch from like primary school to high school. Like you
Just
do the whole thing at the same place,
interesting.
right?
So you already had connections to Chicago,
Yeah, exactly. Well, but it was kind of like fate, like
right?
those kind of hints. I don't know if you see, but sometimes in life, you start seeing like these patterns that starts like repeating in your own life. That was one of those things that kind of like became a pattern in my life with the high school, the project of my wife, that kind of stuff. Like one thing that was very that was very foretelling of what was gonna happen is that my wife actually started on that project like way back in the day, like in 2013, and on that year, we're like, it was our first year of marriage, and we were both starting when we were both starting at some companies, and I had to go to San Francisco for work, and then she had to go to Chicago.
Mhm.
She was starting on the project I eventually took her. So I came here to Chicago like one weekend to visit, and we were going to a Depeche Mode concert. And so we were standing on Chicago River, just overlooking at the buildings, and I just saw, like, I saw her, and I told her, like, I don't know why, but I think we're gonna eventually start, like, come and live here. Like, I don't know, like, don't ask me why, but I have that feeling that we're gonna end up here. It's like, why? Like, there's no way. I'm like, I was like, I don't know. Don't ask me why, but I have a feeling. Eventually we ended up here.
Manifesting.
Yeah, but it was like, and there was no chance. Like really, there was no chance because the kind of stuff that my wife and I do, it's usually outsourced. Like they usually outsource it to India or Latin America or East Europe now. But it's very, very hard for a company to like hire you to like move when you're doing like the line of work that we're doing.
Mm.
So it was, really, really odd. And at the time, we were actually, because I really wanted to leave Colombia, which is something that I'm now a little bit like, kind of like, you know, at that time I was like, there's no future here for me. And if I'm doing art, if I want to do arts, because I wanted to be a big artist like back in the day. And I was like, if I want to make a name for myself, it's never gonna happen in Columbus. I was like kind of like spitting at the sky at that time, and so I wanted to leave. Like, I tried to go to Canada, and we were also trying to do Australia. And when we were on that period of time was when the U.S. thing happened, and I was like, yeah, let's go. But now, in retrospect, I feel a little bit bad about feeling like that way. But you're young, you don't know what the immigration, like the whole thing about leaving your country and leaving your stuff is gonna be like in reality.
Do you feel guilt?
A little bit, because
Yeah.
and there's a lot uh, of of guilt, because most of the people from my background and from my country that come here don't usually come the way I did, right? Like with work and with a visa and everything, kind of like everything set up. Most of the times they kind of like work the system to get here, and like they overstay the visa or whatever. And so it's it kind of like makes me feel like, oh man, like I see these people, like I usually see a lot of like Colombian guys like just driving Ubers or like doing service things. When I started working, I started noticing I was the only Latino at the place, like especially in software. Like there were like one other guy, or like, and the Latino guys that you would see, or like the guy that comes and clean the office, or like stuff like that. I've started seeing them in age, like started like, I don't know, I just felt guilty, like these people are like doing this stuff that's really tough, and I'm here complaining, how hard I have it, like pretty much, starting, from a very good, but
Yeah.
that's life. And
I feel a lot of guilt. And so to fill listeners in on my lore, I moved from Maine in the US
yeah,
to Brighton in the United Kingdom in 2011 now. So it's
wow,
been, yeah, 12 years. I moved over for university, not for any good reason other than I didn't really get into any universities in the States. I think I applied to like 18 and I got into
uh-huh.
three. One was New College of Florida, and then one was I got like almost like a full ride to some random small university in like Kentucky, and I was like, that's just not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And then
Do you
I
see
took
yourself in Kentucky?
no, I well, do you know what? Now I could probably like now I think I'd have a great time. I'd be on my like Lana Del Rey, Jack Donaghy, like Ethel Cain hype. But no, at the time like that just was not gonna happen. And then I went and toured New College of Florida, and they said yeah, I remember on the tour like the exact moment I decided I could not go there is that like as like a bragging point, the tour guide was like, there are only two buildings on all of campus that you have to wear shoes in. And I was like, people aren't wearing shoes to their lectures? I don't know. No, no, no. I'm not gonna do that. No, allow that. So yeah, I decided not to. And so I'd applied kind of as a joke to a bunch of UK universities. And um I got into most of them because unlike the US, they don't care if you're a well-rounded person. They just care if you get the
Okay.
marks, and then if you get the marks, you can come. So suddenly became very much a reality, and I went to Sussex for my undergrad and my master's in neuroscience and then genetics, and then I did my PhD in molecular biology. So yeah, similar, like nothing to do with art. It was just sort of hedging my bets. But yeah, I feel very guilty as well for having left now. Only sort of the past couple of years, but I think being an only child and seeing when I go home my parents being a bit older,
Right. Yeah.
I
I'm
feel
I'm
quite
going through
bad.
that. I'm going through
Yeah.
that right now. 'Cause actually, the reason why I was in Colombia right now is because my mom just turned 80.
Wow.
And yeah, and it was like, well, if we were able to like gather with we don't have a big family. It's just like my siblings and my parents. basically, because we don't have like this big extended family kind of thing. Like my mom lost contact with most of her relatives, and my dad's only living relatives that we kind of know of are my aunt, who lives in Canada. So, but we're kind of close, but as close as you can be with people that's like in Toronto while you're living in Colombia.
Yeah.
It's not something we don't see them that much, but they're the people that we see the most outside of it. And so we're kind of the same. My sister lives in Dallas. My brother lives in a small Colombian city called Cali, and my mom and dad, they live in Bogota. So it's kind of like hard for us to like kind of be on at the same place at the same time. So we were actually, I actually just kind of like realized that the last time that we were all together was the day that I married, which was
Really?
11 years ago. Yeah, 11 years ago was the last time we were all at the same place, which was a little bit of a sad thought.
Yeah.
So they were really happy and we had a great time. But it kind of like that was kind of one of those things. Like my mom's going through like her old age, and my mom's like, well, my mom and dad, they're on my dad is a little bit deeper on the 80s, but my dad has a really, he's been keeping up. He's very, he loves reading. He goes out and run. Kind of keeps an active life. But my mom has started to lose a little bit of she's going through a mental decline. She's starting to forget things and starting to act a lot like a kid. So you get into this weird space where you become the parent, and that's crazy. Like becoming your parents' parent.
Yeah.
just it's a trip, and also I'm like the youngest of the siblings by far, because I my brother that was next from it's like he's 15 years older than me, and my sister is 17 years older. So I'm kind of like I'm really
You're the
really
baby.
behind. Yeah, I'm the baby.
It's funny because
So
I think of you as the Kanyo daddy, and yet you're the baby.
yeah, and in my family, I'm the baby, but I've become sort of like a parent, but because my mom's being in this mental state where she acts really like a kid, like a spoiled kid. And it's hard to deal with that. It's been really, really crazy to go through that, because you have to like learn how to bargain with her, and learn how to like if we were I don't have any kids yet, but I feel like the way I interact with her is like if I had a kid, I would like interact with my kid the same way I'm interacting with my mom now. And it's a big adjustment. And also like the fact that I'm here and not there,
Yeah.
it makes me anxious a lot of times, especially when when she gets sick, or like she gets into, or you learn that something happened in your absence and they didn't tell you at the time, but then eventually, like, I don't know if it happens to you that you're away with your parents, but parents kind of like tell you some things and they don't tell you other things, but you eventually, kind of like find out. And
Yeah.
my mom's the queen of that. Like my mom's
It's
the queen of telling you and then telling you like after the fact.
I can't remember where I heard this, but it always stuck with me. They call it like a light bulb moment where you go home and you find a light bulb that's not been changed, and you realize that if you hadn't been there, it just wouldn't have gotten changed.
Yeah, exactly.
My parents are a bit younger than yours, and
Mm.
so I've not really had it with them, but my grandmother, during the pandemic really sort of declined cognitively, and I think, being on her own and not being able to see anyone really
Right.
expedited that, and now she can, she's not really verbal anymore, and so I just remember the whole time I was in lockdown, I felt like I had to get back because
Right.
I didn't know how often, like how much longer I had before she just wouldn't know who I am. And we've reached that point now. So I feel a lot less guilty about not going back,
Right.
but it's still on my mind, I think
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I have to learn how to drive. Like eventually I'm gonna have to go back and drive my parents, and I don't know how to drive. And there's just
Right.
nowhere there's no way I'm gonna get them around in the US without being able to drive. So
You don't
yeah.
have any other siblings?
Just me, just me. Yeah,
Oh,
my
okay,
parents
yeah,
had me and they were like, that's enough.
yeah. So that's a big responsibility to shoulder, you know.
Yeah.
It's
And you know, similarly, my dad, he was the only one who didn't leave. His siblings both left, and so he was um stuck, not stuck, he's happy to do it, you know, having to take care of my grandmother during her decline, but it just meant he got all of the shit too, you know, like he
right,
got
yeah,
all of the bad things that happened when she
yeah,
started to get paranoid and stuff. She blamed it on him, and you know, that was difficult
yeah,
that he took care of her. And then
yeah. Old age is really it's a roll of the dice. It's
yeah.
absolutely a roll of the dice. Like you know, some people get like a and my parents kind of reflect that. My dad has going through like a very easygoing kind of like old age. He doesn't have like any like big health problems. He's still like operate like his mind. He's still super sharp. He's kind of like like we were I was talking about that with my sister, that he became kind of like Grandpa Simpson, where he's like goes like this really long stories and like loses track of whatever he was saying, but he's still like really sharp and like he remembers things, and he's become more social, which is great. My dad used to be like really quiet and he was like not really social, and I think now he's more, and I think this is the pandemic thing, because I had it too,
Mm.
where like he just opened up. Now he's just like super open to sharing whatever's in his mind, and he will go like 30-40 minute tirades of talk about like whatever topic, especially politics. He loves politics, so like he would like go into like long rants. And he's really leftist, but so I
My
gotcha.
parents have recently gotten into medical marijuana, and so
Oh,
that's made it a lot better for them, I think.
that's cool.
Most of the time I call them now and they're like high as a kite. Um, so back to art though.
Oh yeah, yeah. By the way,
By the way, um, how do you think having moved and sort of now being so far from home has impacted um your creativity, your practice?
it did a lot, because it became kind of like a constant thought when I'm creating. The fact, you know, well, I try to the stuff that I do, my drawings, all of the things that I do, in art, are kind of like a reflection of my life, right? Like I try to make that be kind of like a journal.
Mm.
And so one of my, well, my situation about like being an immigrant is obviously like a big part of my, myself, or the person that I think about when I think about myself is, one of those things is, I'm an immigrant. I'm between these two worlds, right? And so that influences a lot of what I do. And I think it has also been like the spark that's helped me, really, really find what I wanted to be my artistic voice, right? Because for a lot of time I was drawing in my sketchbook, but I was really aimless. I was like, I like human figure, and I would like two heads and draw people, but I was always, seeing other artwork, and I was always feeling like mine was lacking something. Like there was no substance. I felt like there was not a subject. It was just like disjointed drawings, and so I feel like once I left, kind of like start telling a story, right? Like it just became like a diary of what I was doing or whatever was in my mind, and it just started clicking, right? And one of the things that clicked was that this disjointed drawings, as I thought they were actually, like, if you put them together, they were like a thing,
Mm.
that so then I realized, I don't have to do, finished, in quotations, finished artwork in order to be an artist. I can also, you know my process can also be, my art piece, or my creation, and I started thinking more into that way, I just putting stuff, and like just letting the daily life and the stuff that I just come up with, and it also like started like, still like doing portraits, still doing human figure, but also like I started adding other stuff that just came, in my mind. I also love, graphic designers, like Japanese graphic design. I love that, and those like mascots they put in like everything. I was obsessed with that for a while, so I started like adding that. And I started also adding text, and so it started telling a story. It's just like trying to grab elements, and so I thought, I was just not gonna put so much thought into like what do I need to say, and just let the artwork just become a thing, and kind of like work first and then explain it later,
Yeah.
kind of
In
thing.
my
And
in the portrait you did of me, there's a mouth with like the lips being
yeah.
pulled back and the teeth, and then there's a little like toothpaste mascot or something of a tooth holding like a
Mm-hmm.
toothbrush. And whenever I show it to people, they ask, oh, what's the story behind that? And I'm like, I don't know. I guess maybe because I'm American originally and I have good teeth, but I don't know what it is.
It's kind of funny because sometimes it doesn't have to really connect, but they connect
Mm,
somehow. The thing is that when I was doing all of the teeth drawing, I was going through a lot of dentist issues, and I was upset. Like I became obsessed with that, and I just became obsessed with teeth at that point. So I just wanted to add that into everything I was doing, and I also felt like I liked drawing teeth. I enjoyed it a lot, so I started like just like splicing it up in like the drawings that I was doing, and I also became obsessed with the mascots. Like I don't know if in Britain's the same way, but like everywhere I've seen, every dentist office has this sort of like mascot of like a tooth with like a brush or something like that. They're happy, and
Yeah, I
and
mean, I'm familiar
it's
with the genre from the US, but I mean, it's just impossible to get a dentist appointment over here without spending
yeah.
loads of money. So,
Well, I'm
yeah,
fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by that kind of like thing that's always happening in dentist offices. That there's always a teeth with this. I find it ridiculous and fascinating. So I started like adding it.
I really like I like going into like world food markets and stuff and like
Mm,
seeing brands that you don't normally see and seeing the mascots that like just
yeah,
you don't have any association with, and so it feels
yeah,
really disjointed. Like there's this brand of pickles in
yeah.
this local supermarket, and it has a penguin as a mascot, and I it's inexplicable to me. Like I don't know what a penguin has to do with gherkins, but like I really love it.
Yeah. Maybe they really like gherkins. Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, do you know, I could see that. They're salty
Yeah.
like a fish. Uh,
So yeah,
um,
I mean, and that kind of like, and all of those things, they're sometimes they're just moments in time, right? Like sometimes I'm just like obsessed with something, and it just like starts repeating in my drawings, and then they stop, and something else just starts happening,
mm,
because it just depends on whatever my mind's kind of like drifting to when I'm doing. But in kind of like tying that back into the experience of immigration is that I started noticing when I moved here that I was craving more portrait drawing. Like I
mm,
was very, very, very obsessed with doing portraits. And then I realized, well, when I was in Colombia, I didn't did that much portrait drawings, and I was very social because I had like a big group of friends who were meeting every now and then, and there was always a lot of action on the weekends, and there were, and then when we moved here with my wife, it was just like the two of us, and it wasn't easy to make friends or connect, because that's one of the things that happens. Like, you think you're just gonna fit, like you come to the place and you're a transplant, and you like everyone's gonna be, yeah, hi neighbor, kind of thing. No,
No.
it's been a struggle, and it's one of the things that would struggle here is making friends. And so I started feeling like really lonely, and I feel like that also fed into like this craving of drawing people, kind of like and also when Kenyo started, that really made, when I joined the group, that that kind of like initiated this like kind of like social thing that I didn't have. It was wild because it was not in real life. It was kind of like everything to Telegram, but still, like I had friends again, and and so I started like, and I was drawing them, and it was interesting also to me because I was drawing all of these people that I've never seen before in my life, and I didn't even knew if I was gonna see them anyways. So, and one thing that I think it had a profound effect on me is that some of those drawings, I was drawing these people like if I knew them, right?
Mm.
Because there's this presence that you feel when you're drawing a portrait, and well, I might be biased, but I was starting to see that presence in the portraits. Like, I feel like the first ones that I did were a little bit more. My first portraits when I joined Kenya, they were really quick. They were just like sketches, but then they started like becoming really, more. I feel like they started like having a little bit of presence, and a little bit more weight, and that was something that to me was very very eye opening, and very fascinating. That even though I never spoke to these people like we're speaking right now, um, and I was seeing them as my friends and as part of my life, and those drawings, I feel like kind of like reflect that, because I feel like those are drawings that reflect knowing someone, right? Kind of
Mm.
like on an intimate level, which is something that I really really love about portrait. It's kind of like this intimate moment, this conversation you have with your subject, and just redrawing and trying to like manifest the presence, trying to like understand what makes the sitter, be that person, right?
Yeah.
Because you can grab like 4 or 5 portraits of the same person, and they're like all different, but they're there, right? Like, there's something that every artist has. Like, there's a different look, right? But it's the same person. It's kind of like everything in life, right? Like, it's like kind of like the opinion you have on something, right? We all see the
It's
same thing, but we all have like a different opinion.
we also often use the term likeness. Have we captured a
Exactly.
likeness? And I
Mm-hmm.
think an element of that is, are the features right? Are the proportions
Mm-hmm.
right? But actually there's an extra dimension, which is like, is something of that person's soul coming through, their
Exactly.
essence, who they are. I wanted to call this episode movement because I like the sort of double, triple meaning of it. And so I wanted to ask you about your portraits and how
Yeah.
you really capture like a sense of movement in them. I was looking through them over the weekend, and the thing I felt looking at them is that it was almost like a lot of the people had just closed their mouths. Like they had just finished saying something and then they
Okay.
had just stopped talking, and you'd caught them at that exact moment where they were, just after saying something to you, and you just like they were just finishing that thought, and it felt like they were still in motion slightly, and you have this beautiful way of kind of it's a fluid way of drawing so that everything feels sort of slippery and sort of still a shake of the head or a twitch of the lips, like there's something still happening. How do you
Yeah.
how do you achieve that?
I think it's mostly because, well, first of all, like, especially like my latest drawings, I'm taking a lot of time to do them. So it's not just one sitting. I sit through like some of them are drawn and redrawn more than once, because I one of the things that I want to capture is like different moments. Like every time that you sit down and you draw something, you know, the first glance that you had, the second time around that you sit there, you're gonna see things differently. So you're gonna start correcting, and you're going to start like. And so I try to use it in a way in which when I correct, quotations a little bit, right? I kind of leave moments from the previous drawings
Mm.
always, because I want that sense of time to be, kind of like there in that in because I kind of like also like tie it into like memory. I wanted to also to feel like if you were having a dream, kind of like you were trying like to think about a person, and it's there but not quite, kind of thing.
Mm.
So it helps me up a lot. So I don't erase it, like I don't correct in a way in which makes it like, it kind of like destroys the previous version of the job. I kind of like try to leave moments of every version that I've had of a certain drawing. I do that a lot, and I think that kind of became the way I work. Not very exact, because I also allow myself to like make mistakes, and because I also feel like that's basically where your style is a little bit, like the errors that you do is it's kind of like part of your style. So when you accept, I feel like there's a point where I realized when I was drawing, because how you start trying to obsess about like quality and lightness and all of that stuff, and then one day I just realized, what if I accept some of those, distortions and kind of like flaws into my drawings, and re-accept them and commit to them, and just like, that's the way I see. It doesn't have to be like exact, photorealistic. And that's when it really clicked for me, when I really started like becoming more empowered to like draw stuff and feel more confident about my drawings. It was when I just accepted that, I I'm not it's okay to not be perfect. And sometimes when you are not perfect and you allow yourself to like fail, and it's when you really are going to start seeing stuff, or differentiate your stuff from other artists, and that's where your voice really starts coming up.
Alexander Kanevsky says something very similar about his process, where he'll paint over and over on the same canvas, and he lets little moments from the previous paintings kind of slip through and enter the next layers, and he builds on them, and actually the painting that comes through with those little moments or accidents below, like, is actually greater than the perfected image if he was just to start like fresh.
Yeah, and to be honest, like the way I work is highly inspired by Alex Nevsky, because I was super super obsessed with his art when I started to like think about art as something that I wanted to do. Back then, I was Nicholas Uribe was my teacher in my college, and he was the one that guided me to like looking into Alex Kanevsky art, because he kind of like saw like that in me, and he said like you're gonna love this guy. And so I started seeing Kanevsky's paintings, and I think that was like 2011, 2012, something like that. Not even before, it was like 2008 or 2009, something like that. And I started seeing that, and I became obsessed. But I kind of like became obsessed on the stuff he did,
Mm.
but really it started clicking with me eventually down the line is the way he worked. And he used to say like he just he works in a way in which he just lets the errors there, and he just like puts paint on top of it, and then puts paint on top of until he feels like satisfied. And
Yeah, I
I
definitely wanted to paint like him when I first started,
yeah,
and
and
actually,
I empathize with his philosophy. Like I love his paintings. I wish I could do something like what he does. but the way he views painting, or the way he creates, really clicked with me, because I feel the same way. I think it's great when you allow yourself to just fail multiple times and something good comes out of it, because that's kind of like, you know, that's kind of like a philosophy for a lot of stuff. You need to like let yourself fail, and
Mm.
sometimes through failure you will find a path that's actually successful.
Also, just casually mentioning that your tutor was Nicholas Uribe.
Oh yeah.
Come on the pod, Nicholas Uribe. No,
Oh
but
yeah, I think you'll be happy to. You'll be more
what
than
was
happy
it like
to
to
join.
learn from him directly?
It was crazy actually, because I didn't know, well, I didn't know who he was, and that was back in 2006 or seven, something like that. I was in college, and my one of my drawing teachers, he was that was about the time he was returning to Colombia, and when Nicolas returned to Colombia, he started teaching in a really small, like art school for like people that do caricatures and stuff like that. That's where he started, and then he got hired by my college, and my teachers knew who he was. That like they've seen his stuff, and they were like obsessed. Like they became all my teachers became obsessed. Like all the classes that he started teaching had more teachers than they had students. It was wild. And so my teacher comes and he says like, you have to take class with this dude. Like you have to do it. And so he gave me his website, and I went to see his work, and I was like blown away. I was like, and that's like his earliest stuff. Like, and I saw those paintings and the stuff that he did, and that's something that I never saw in Colombia. Like, I don't know. It's this is a very weird like colonial thinking, kind of thing. But back when I was in college, I thought that you could not do that quality level of art. Like it was not for us. It was for people
Oof.
that studied in the US or in Britain or in Europe. But for us, it was just like the same old, right? Like there's this level to which you can get, and yeah, like I remember that it was fine thinking, like we're kind of like mediocre, and that's where we're gonna get. But like all of that amazing stuff, like you can't do it. Like that's for people that go to outside of the third world, and they learn how to do it. And
Oh,
because
that's
that seemed to be the track, right? Like the people that you saw that went to like masters and or studied in the New York Academy of Arts, or went to Europe, to an atelier in Italy or whatever, they were the ones that were able to do like amazing stuff with human figure. While in Colombia it was very kind of like mediocre. So I thought, yeah, I'm gonna just like be another mediocre artist. But
that's so gutting to hear that you felt that way.
yeah, and
Um,
that's the way a lot of us felt about it. It
I
was like it's okay, it's the way it is. But
Fran
when I saw,
Lebowitz Fran Lebowitz
oh
says, talent is the only thing that's not, that you can't sort of hoard or sort of pass down through families. Like it's completely random. It's handed out randomly in, every demographic across the planet. And that's why it's something that we have to cherish because it's so rare and it's so, valuable and it's just stroke of luck who gets it. It can be someone from anywhere who
yeah, but back in the day, we didn't have Instagram in those
mm,
days. Like anything, like all the art you saw was whatever came in the books, or passed down by someone who knew about artists, or stuff that was going on in the U.S. or in Europe, and would tell you like, hey, go look at the art this guy's doing. And so in Colombia, we didn't have like galleries or anything that would show, what was going on with the art world, at that time, especially not with the figurative world, because my teachers in college were like they were kind of like in this headspace where like figurative art is dead. You have to go into process art, landscape art, like all of this the big movements that were in like the early 2000s. That was where it was. So like every time that you painted or that you drew or whatever, you know, most of my some of my teachers would be questioning. You're like, why are you painting? Why are you drawing? Like that's that drawing's dead, painting's dead. Like you shouldn't be doing. You guys are dinosaurs. Like why are you doing that? Because in Colombia, it's such a small market for art that there's just like one way to do things, right? Like
Mm.
there's just like one way, and if you go out of that way, it's just like oh, you're just like a folk artist or whatever. Like,
Mm.
and that's kind of sad. And but that being said, like the U.S. has like a huge art market. And there's a market for it. There's the circuit of art, but there's also a lot of figurative art. There's a lot of things going on. So like there's always a market for whatever you do.
Yeah.
So well that ties in what I saw the art of Nicolas, and I immediately like enrolled in his classes for painting, and not only for me but for a lot of people. It was a very it was very great luck that we had him taught, because he's a really great teacher, in the way that he won't force you to draw or paint like him. He finds what's good about what you do, and he will give you like 10 references for you to look at that will actually empower you to like see something that looks like what you do. So like then you realize, oh yeah, I can do stuff like the stuff that's going on. Like I can also be good. Like not it's not something that's reserved for other people. Like I can do it too. Like there's people that do stuff that looks like what I do, and
He
that was
helps you
great. So
see yourself in the world.
it opened up my mind to a lot of art, and a lot of like I started getting obsessed with a lot of artists, James Jean and Kent Williams and well Alex Knevsky, and like there's no other way I would have known about these dudes if it weren't for Nicolas.
Mm.
And that really inspired me, and like actually that's where I really started like wanting to be an artist when I saw like the stuff that these guys did, and I said like this is something doable, like this is a path. Eventually life had other plans for me, and so I didn't really like went into like a life of being like a full-time artist. But at the time, like that was a very inspiring thing, and not only for me. I feel like Nicolas inspired like a huge, I would say, revolution of figurative art in Colombia. Like there's this like big group of Colombian artists that were all students of him by one way or another, like by because he also tutored in like he had a little like atelier studio with another teacher of mine, and so a lot of people went to like take his lessons there, and now he's doing it with his podcast on
Yeah.
YouTube, which is amazing. Like he's always been one thing that I really commend Nicolas on is that he's always been very kind with all of his knowledge. He is a very kind person to like share, which was also something that in Colombia was kind of like taboo, because there was like this like the people that were really good painters or draftsmen or whatever, because there were always men, of course. uh, they were very protective about their professional secrets or whatever. Like
Mm.
they would teach you on up to a point, and if they saw some potential in you, they would start like kind of like drifting away, because they saw you like they then you became like a potential competition, right? In a
Yeah.
small market, right? So they didn't really want it to like so, and so there were a lot of teachers like that, but Nicolas was very, very, always very very happy to share all of his secrets and knowledge and expertise, and he has like such a big, visual library. So like
I
was
think,
always
if you don't
showing
have that
drawings.
generosity, you can't be a teacher. You have
Exactly,
to.
but same, like there's a lot of people that kind of like were just like, this is the way you draw, and that's all they're gonna teach you. They're not gonna really like empower you to like find
Mm,
your own voice. Like you should draw like this, and that's it.
gosh. Uh, so on the flip side of all this, I want to ask you about, you've become a transplant, you're settled now in Chicago. What what is the value of in your eyes of being still, of how does that help you creatively and creating artwork and staying in one place for a while?
Um, well, I would say like even if you stay at this, even if you stand still at one place, life keeps on going, right?
Mm,
And so, I've settled in the city, but still there's a lot of things going on in my life, and I'm not impervious to that. It's like, and all of those things also kind of like impact me, the politics of being an immigrant, because it doesn't end with you just landing somewhere. You also become a part of something, a part of a community, or there's all of this politics about what you're doing, and that affect you, even if you don't want them to affect you, or if you ignore how they affect you like one way or another. Um, there's all of this conflicts of who am I, right? Like, am I American, am I Colombian, who am I, right? Am I losing my the connection to my birthplace? um I've always thought about this kind of like thing. I don't know, I have this very recurring thought about when you become an immigrant, how you become a little bit like a ghost, and you're trapped between worlds, and you're
mm,
neither here nor there, and you're just in limbo, right? You kids, and I always like reflect a lot about that when I go back to Colombia, and I feel more a tourist now,
that's
but a little
interesting.
part of myself feels like, oh, I got back home, but home's not there anymore, right? So it's just like, and you think when I'm there, I feel like not a day passed, right? Even though like there's been years, sometimes like there's been years or months or whatever, and life went on. Like your friends moved on, your family moved on, everything moved on. But you were there and you meet them, and it's like time never went by. And
Yeah.
those sort of things, they always make me like I'm very aware of that. And also like coming here, like for a moment of time it was like, oh, vacations, right? Like because going to the US was vacations or work, but it was not home. And then it starts becoming like, oh, this starts becoming like a familiar place, and it's home. But is it home, right? Like you start like, well, I don't know, like something could happen, they could kick me out, and what happens, right? Like you're
Yeah.
always like kind of like on that line, right? Like you're here, but you're not fully here, but you have your home there, but that's not your home anymore because everybody moved on. Like if I get like if I went to Colombia like tomorrow, like, and I decided like, oh, I'm moving back there, I would have to start from zero,
Yeah.
because I'm not used to it anymore. Like it's so different, and so that stuff's always on the back of my mind. It's
Yeah, I can relate fully, and I'm very conscious of the fact that my immigration experience is so much more privileged than most people's in the world.
true.
And yet I still feel so unmoored, and even, it's been 12 years now, and I just got my indefinite leave to remain, and I'm settled
Mm.
here now. But I still have that like gnawing sense that this could end at any moment.
Yes, exactly.
And when I go back, I feel like I stick out like a sore thumb. Like I feel so sort of a part of the city that I live in
Mhm.
now. And I feel kind of like I don't stick out at all. I feel like,
Mhm.
this is where I'm meant to be. And then I go home and I just, it's me with my long red hair, trying to get like gas station coffee, uh, that like tastes like cigarettes, and
Mhm.
everyone's staring at me, and I don't belong in rural Maine anymore. And yet that's still home. And
Yeah,
and and
exactly.
and so, but I think, I've really recognized the importance of staying in one place. This is my third year in my
Mhm.
current flat, and usually I was moving at least once, if not more, every year,
Mhm.
just jumping around from student flat to new city to study somewhere else, and I'm producing the best work of my life now because I'm in one place, because I have the space, because
Yeah.
I can stick around, I can get a studio, um I can accumulate canvases, and maybe eventually I'll paint over them, but like there's space to have things to experiment with, and also, you know yes, you notice lots of things when you're moving, but you also become very distracted. And actually, it's when you're able to sit down and in one place and kind of look intently that you really begin to notice things fully, and you see
Right.
the full motion of life, and how it sort of it feels richer when you're able to just stay in one place sometimes.
Yeah. You know what? I've been going through the same experience as you, but backwards. Because I was very used to moving, so it kind of became like my sort of like my routine. Because ever since I got married, for some reason or another, like I don't know, it was just a constant in my married life to be moving. And when we lived in Colombia, we're like renting places, so like we moved fairly often. We would not stay at a place more than 1 year, and then we moved to the U.S. And it was the same, like because we were on a workers visa, we were not really on a residence until recent. So we were very aware of the fact that something could happen and be like needing to move back. So we were always renting, always renting. And so this summer, uh, for chance, we had to buy our apartment. Like we had the opportunity to buy our apartment. We recently got our residence, our green card last year, so things have started to become more definite, right?
Mazel
and
tov.
and this, yeah, thank you. And this year we were actually, I was not thinking about buying the apartment, and then by chance the owners of the apartment where I was renting, they wanted to sell it, and they gave us the chance to buy it. And well, it was a favorable price, and we wanted to do it, and we were kind of like forced to do it. Well, forced in the space that it was kind of like those moments where you think it's now or never. And we decided to do it, and we did it, and it was a very, it was a very happy experience. We were like, finally we have a place that we can call home. But now I'm going through all of this process of like readapting myself to the fact that I now have finally a home after 11 years of just being on the move. And so I've been kind of like reconfiguring myself, because I just like feel like I moved so much that I feel so tired. And I cannot, like I've been going through like a few months of just like stopping to do any artwork, because I feel like I need to rest a little bit.
You deserve it.
Cause yeah, because I felt like I've been on the move, and not being able to like just so I adapted myself to be like kind of like flexible, that I have to work on the go, so I don't need much. And that's a little bit like the reason I use the sketchbook, is that I can just like use it everywhere. I don't know. I don't need like an easel or whatever. So I don't have any. I used to have an easel. I don't have it anymore. Like any of that. It's like now I want to paint. Now I want to do stuff that takes a little bit more time. It's not as fleeting and as quick. So I'm kind of like settling down again and trying to like reconfigure my brain to like restart again, producing art. I mean, I've been always drawing anyways. Like even when I stop, I don't stop drawing. I still do stuff, but not the kind of stuff that that I would call like body of work. I'm just like trying to reconfigure again, trying to like see what happens on this next kind of like I feel like I'm going through like this kind of like stage of my life, like a new stage in my life. And I've always had a hard time like adapting to those. So I have to, but I know myself enough to know that I have to like stop, that things kind of settle, and then things will just like happen. Before I was like I would become really anxious about it, and because I'm like, oh, I want to work, but I don't want to work, and it just like becomes like this factor of stress. And now like if I want to work, I do it. If I don't want to work, I don't do it, and that's fine. Because another thing is that I find out with age is that you can keep doing this, and actually the idea is to keep doing this for the long run. But if you want to do it in the long run, you have to take pause, and you have to do it in a way in which you don't burn out quickly. Like there's this fantastic artists that just work themselves to burn out and then don't produce on years because they're just like saturated. So it's
I
better to like take pauses and
I could definitely learn to take a few more pauses, because like you, I have a day job, and when I'm not podcasting now, I'm
yeah,
I'm painting. Usually, I usually go from work to the studio to paint. I spend my weekends painting, and I feel so guilty if I'm not
right.
painting, because I think I have such precious little time, and it would yeah. So but I do notice I reach a point and I just think I have to take a couple weeks off, and
And it's fine, and it's good to take a pause
yeah.
because it's just a thing. You want to, if you really want to do it in the long run, you just need to like pace yourself. And if you see like a lot of artists, like they're not producing like the greatest artwork like every day. Sometimes they take pauses, they take vacations, they take a time for themselves. Because sometimes it's saturated. Like it's to keep creating stuff, it's saturating. Like it saturates you. But the
Mm.
thing is that Instagram kind of like changed the way in which we see art, and we think we have to like keep producing and producing and producing, and not only producing, but producing like banger artwork. Like every piece that you do has to be a banger, so you can scan it and put it on your Instagram. And I was kind of like becoming like that. And so if you did something that you didn't like, or was not like worth it, then you're like, you become a mess because you're like, oh no, I'm gonna kind of like, you feel like you're gonna fall from a bandwagon or something. Like I'm gonna fall from the wagon, and it's just gonna leave me, and my followers are gonna leave me, and my likes are gonna go down. And probably they did. I think they did for me,
I
but
never
nothing
had
happens.
I never had any engagement to begin with, so there was no wagon for me to fall off
Yeah,
of.
but for a lot of artists, that's a huge point of anxiety, because it became this thing. It was Instagram is a great and a bad thing. It's a really good and really bad thing. Because it's a really good thing because we got to see a lot of art that in other like from in another way we would have never seen it. Like I have all of this. I'm following all of this Iranian artists that are like absolutely amazing. I had no idea that they had such amazing artwork there, for instance. And I wouldn't know it if it weren't for Instagram. And
Yeah.
like, and same for a lot of different parts of the world. But that being said, you're always seeing like this, banger works of art, like constantly, and you're also comparing yourself to them, and you're like, man, I'm such a lazy
Yeah.
dude. Just people are just like producing.
I do feel the pressure to like I can't waste time. So I like, even if it's not a good painting I've made, I have to post it when like normally I would just never show anyone. And then, months go by and I'm like, I really wish I hadn't put that out into the world. But
But
uh
it's kind of crazy to me too that we see like rest as a waste of time. Like it's absolutely not. Resting is very important. It's as important as working. Like when you rest is when everything kind of like decants, and you're also like being inspired by by whatever's going around you, by your life, by your interests, by it's also good to read books. It's also good to like listen to music, go outside and see the world around you, and that you find that inspiration. Because if you're just working and zero inspiration, then things start becoming bland a little bit.
Mm.
It just becomes like a photocopy.
So my last question to you, I kind of want to take on the third meaning of movement.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard to see these things in the moment they're happening, but do you see yourself as part of like do you think there's a current movement in art? Do you think we're experiencing a movement, or has, Instagram and the internet made everything too diffuse, and there are too many just competing genres for there to be a coherent movement in art at the moment?
That is a really good question. I I I think I think there's something going on. You know, I definitely feel it. Like there's this kind of like I'll say like revolution of like figurative art. I don't know if I'm biased because I'm following it on Instagram and whatnot, and I see it so much. But I think there is something going on. And of course, since I'm doing it, I'm a part of it. Um, I don't know. I have an issue of like seeing myself in the big picture because I just see myself as just another artist in a big wave of artists. But yeah, I definitely think I'm a part of it because I'm also producing work that's relevant to this kind of movement of people that are just like drawing themselves. We're just like this is like a huge pool of artists making artwork out of other artists, which is very 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 you know weird if you think about it that way. But it's very interesting too. It's just like, hey, well, we're here. And let's draw each other. Let's recognize each other. Let's kind of like and learn from each other, which is also amazing. Like there's so much inspiration going on. There's so much stuff. I don't know if all of the politics of Instagram, and I refer to politics as the way they they show the stuff that they want to show to people, and the way they curate kind of their algorithm. It's detrimental to it, but you know that's gonna be hard to see right now because we cannot see it on the full picture. But it's hard to see it in perspective because we're in the middle of it. But I think you know when time goes by, we're just gonna see the work that's produced from this era, and there's a lot. It's gotta be really hard to curate you
Yeah.
know that work because there's so much from
Yeah.
so many different places. Like I think art was a thing that was very very located in just like this hotspots before this. Like there were just like 4 or 5 big names or 10, and now there's like this whole catalog of amazing artists that we have the privilege of witnessing. I think it's amazing. I think I'm really happy to be alive at this moment because of all of this that's happening. Kenyo is kind of like one thing that kind of like makes me think about that because there's so many amazing artists from like so many places in the world, and just being able to be a part of that and witness that, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I asked the question not really knowing the answer because on the one hand, I go on Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is, and that I'm a bit overwhelmed by the amount of art that's out there, and just the different styles, and how, you know, referential everything is, and interconnected, and I don't know how you could ever classify it into one thing.
Yeah.
So John Seed wrote, or has produced a book called Disrupted Realism.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think this is him sort of putting forth his idea of what the current movement is, and you
Yeah,
know, it's art of a distracted society. It's glitching, it's things transposed on other things. It's, you know, I think your work fits in there with, you know, the different drawings on top of one another. um
yeah, I would agree. I would agree with you on that assessment. Yeah, and I pretty much, I think I was inspired by that book as well. Like that, I read that book, and definitely, I think what you see is very sharp. Yeah, it's this is like the era of disjointed realism.
yeah, and I think, you know, he he gets at the fact that it all hinges on a sense of like visual disorientation that the viewer experiences, which I think makes sense because, you know, if I look at someone like James Bland, who features in the book, who I learned from, like it's on the face of it a bit difficult to think how would you put him together with someone like Alex Kanevsky when they're so
Right.
different. But then actually no, like there are elements to Bland's work that like have that same um sort of confusion to them, you know, like some is it a doll's house in a bigger house, or you know, these
Mm-hmm.
these things that echo the confusion of the world around us, and sort of um the epistemic crisis that we're facing with knowledge, and you know, can
Yeah.
you trust anything, can you trust anything you see, and that being sort of folded into figurative art. I think that might be the through line, and I think he's correctly sort of diagnosed
Right.
what's going
Yeah.
on in art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Spot on. Spot on. I agree with you.
And yet, I sort of find myself moving away from that. You know, I spent so long trying to sort of force myself into that Kanevskian box, and now I'm finding myself in my moment of stillness having the ability to like paint more, um, going for something more concrete and sort of like
Mm.
hyper rendered. So who knows what will happen, but
Yeah. I think I see your point, right? Like you get saturated a little bit of like it becomes repetitive, and you also start seeing patterns, like artists that are like working on the same way that some artists is working. It just like becomes, but it's sort of like a dialogue. I also see the interesting thing about like how many people have so much different interpretations of just the one thing. And yeah, it definitely becomes repetitive at some point. Like sometimes, you when you see it so much, you just feel like, oh, I just want to do something different, which is also all right. Like it's also great when you get to that point where I saw this enough that I want to do my own thing, and maybe the your own thing is just going back to to the roots, to the basics.
mm, yeah. And who knows where I'll go in the future, and where
Yeah,
you'll go. I'm excited to see you paint though. You said you want to get
thank
into
you.
painting.
Yeah, I think I'm always saying that. I've been saying that for a lot. But I think now that that I have a more stable place that's more doable than it was before, because I didn't have any interest on doing it just because of the hassle
Mm,
of the whole thing. The setup, there's this kind of like painting. I see it kind of like this ritual thing where because you have to like brushes and you have to clean them, and there's always this ritual about it. I'm very bad at rituals. so
I'm just bad at
but I
cleaning
but
my
I also
brushes.
like, yeah, exactly, but I kind of like get annoyed at just the thought of having to deal with a cleanup. It's just,
Mm.
and the thing is that my wife loves the house being like really clean, so like
Well, painting is not going to help with that.
stresses me out. Yeah, it stresses me out. I've actually kind of like been thinking about like getting a plate, like a studio or something that I can just like have. But I don't. Well, it might or might not happen. But I do want to paint. Like I do want to go back to paint just because I've been drawing I've been drawing for a long time. So I kind of like find myself in a place where I want to kind of like do something different for a little while, because I'm not, comes a point when you do something for a long time, you kind of like start like getting uninspired and just like
Mm,
going through the motions. And I felt like I was going through that, so I want to do something different just to like kind of like
change
keep
it up.
myself on my toes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can see your suitcase in the background there, and I'm aware that you've had a long day of traveling, so I won't keep you any longer. But thank you for taking the time to come straight on the pod. It was good to see you.
It was great to
Um,
see you, Alex. Thank you.
oh,
Be right
thanks.
back.
Thanks for coming on. Where can people find your work?
Well, Instagram, of course, Camilo underscore Carreno is my Instagram handle. I also have a website, which is camilocarreno.com. Haven't been really good about updating it. I think that's gonna be my pet project this week. My wife's gonna be still in Colombia, so I have a lot of time for myself. So probably I should do that. So yeah, those are places where people can see my work. And
Great.
yeah,
Thanks so
thank
much
you
for
so
coming
much,
on.
Alex. Thank you
All
so much.
right, go
It's
rest
been great.
up. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
And this is just a reminder to listeners that if you enjoyed the conversation you heard today, please consider supporting the Painterly podcast by liking and subscribing, becoming a member of our Patreon, or donating to our crowdfunder, where I'm raising money to get better equipment to give you the best podcasting experience possible. Thanks very much.